Hello, my name is Daniel Ross, and today on A Load of BS on Sport with myself and Dan Biggar, as always, we welcome former world number 4 tennis player, two-time Grand Slam finalist, our first American guest, if I'm not mistaken, it's Todd Martin.
But I went out against Sampras. There was so much nonsense in my head. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I acted like a child as opposed to a professional. I don't love admitting this because it does illustrate how unprepared I was for that moment in my career. What moment am I in? By the end of the match, I had no clue where I was.
Dan Biggar, firstly, how are you, mate?
Survived the weekend. Two children's parties, which I've managed to get through. Speaking French for the majority of them, so I was a bit exhausted after yesterday, but managed to get through the weekend, and I'm in fine shape. What about yourself?
I'm not too bad. Also, I had a lovely weekend, slightly less glamorous, sort of vacuuming, feeding, pushing swings, watching dinosaur programs, making potions in the kitchen, usual sort of stuff. But I think Todd Martin, by the way, coming to slightly more interesting matters than our kids' activities, but I think Todd Martin is going to be a bit of a different story from Stephen Hendry last week, who he talked to. Because like Stephen, Todd was also known for his composure under pressure, but unlike Stephen, Todd was what we might call an elite underdog. He was close, but not quite the cigar. So I think what lies beneath all that will be interesting. What's the psychology of the near misses? What's the weight of expectation? The internal conversations that shaped him? And, what does it look like when you're figuratively 1 point away from greatness? It'll be great. We'll be able to talk about all the greats of his era, the greats of this era, who we know better, who he's interacted with. So I think insights into all of that, I think, is going to be really fascinating.
Yeah, I think it works quite nicely for us having almost, an absolute elite level champion, multiple champion on in Stephen Hendry from a snooker world last week, and having Todd Martin, who in his own right is a bloody good tennis player. Do you know what I mean? But falls into a category of the almost guys and the level probably below the real sort of giants of the era, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm quite interested to find the comparison and what the difference is when you're asking, because I'd imagine we'll ask Todd a lot of the similar questions, but in reverse this week to what we did to Stephen last week, wouldn't we? So that'll be interesting. Is there anything in particular you're looking to get out of him?
I'm interested in that whole question, that question of choking, if that's a word that one can use, but he talks about it himself. I'm really interested in the psychology of that. You see it all the time, when people used to talked about sort of Finn Russell in the Six Nations. I think it was missing that crucial kick. It's, getting over the finish line when under the most extreme pressure, getting into that mindset. I'm really interested about. Apart from that, I think he's going to be a lovely guy. That's my instinct. Haven't met him, but that's my gut feel. You?
I'm just given that quote. It's very rare you hear people admitting that they choked as well, isn't it? You know what I mean? Like quite often people will find another excuse, or I didn't quite feel right, or the opposition played, or the opposition player played a bit better, etc. But it's rare that you sort of get somebody really openly and admitting that they did choke, because that hurts your personal pride, doesn't it? You can always lose a point of tennis or a match of rugby or football, but I think that is more personal. So that'll be the thing which I'm keen to find out.
Let's get him in. Welcome to you, Todd Martin. How are you, and where are you speaking from today?
Thanks, Daniel. I'm well. I'm in a place called Portsmouth, Rhode Island, which is just outside of Newport, Rhode Island, which is a historic town in the smallest state of the country.
Another city named after somewhere in the UK. Well, that's a lovely connection already. Never been to Rhode Island, but sounds lovely. Now, to dive right into it, Todd, you were, at least in my mind, one of the great tennis tour stalwarts of the 90s and early 2000s that I grew up watching in all the Grand Slams. If it's not a question with too great a scope, what have you been up to? What have you been doing for the last 20 years? What occupies your life now?
Well, not running around chasing tennis balls in shorts, that's for sure. So I've had a really interesting post-playing career. I started with what I would refer to as my dream job throughout my career, and that was coaching Mardy Fish right after. Mardy called me a month after I had retired, and worked with him for 3 years. And then just before he started to really hit his stride and do great, and then I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years later, Novak Djokovic called me and spent a year with him. Frankly, two of the most fascinatingly talented tennis players of this century, and I didn't enjoy either experience too much. And I think I left that experience and just like, I'd been playing, and then all of a sudden I was living somewhat the same lifestyle, but for somebody else's pursuits. Not long after that, I still had coaching and teaching in my heart, so I started a business helping kids from 5 to 25 pursue the sport. So anything from getting kids started at the very early stages of their lives to helping young professionals transition into the game and strive to chase their dream. 2 years into that, I was recruited to become the CEO of the International Tennis Hall of Fame, which is why we're in Rhode Island. I did that for 9 years. I was recruited away from that to be the head of tennis for a family office that just bought the tournament, the Masters 1000 tournament in Cincinnati, Ohio. So I sort of split time between being tournament director in Cincinnati and working out of the family office in South Carolina. That was my first boss in an employment setting. It was not my greatest experience, and in fact, and now just a couple of weeks ago, I've started a new role as Chief Strategy and Operations Officer for a company called Swing, Racket, and Paddle. It's a new platform that will build 12 very large venues across the U.S., offering tennis, pickleball, and padel, as we say it in America. It's probably paddle or something. Yeah. And but doing it in a very purpose-built, intentional way to bring community together. It's open to the public. Fantastic design and high-level experiences, yet very accessible and approachable for anybody who wants to pick up a racket or a paddle.
Well, I can tell you here in the UK and by extension in Europe, paddle, padel, pickle, all these variations are growing like crazy. It is the sport of the zeitgeist right now. So that's interesting to hear. But we're absolutely fascinated to hear about your coaching experiences with Mardy and Novak. We will come back to that. You dropped some tantalizing thoughts there. But just to go back before we go more closer to the present, tell us a little about your background. What first drew you to tennis? What kind of kid were you off the court? Were there moments in those early years where you suddenly felt, yes, I'm at a level here, I think I can make this pro, and the influences that helped you shape the platform which gave you the great career that you had as a player?
Yeah. So I think my success on the tennis court started when I was born. I was born to two amazing parents. My mother, who's 87 for the last week, has her master's degree in health and physical education. So ahead of her time for a female to be passionate about sports. And then my father was a corporate attorney in American. In the American world, he was sort of the typical high school jock, played football, basketball, ran track, played a little baseball. And tennis was where my parents actually found that they recreated the best. And so I chased them up. My older sister, who's the best human being in our family, can't walk and chew gum at the same time. And so I'd chase my parents up to the tennis courts. And if I behaved myself, I'd get to play, I'd get to play home run derby a little bit with my dad. And then I, just found every moment of every day was occupied with a ball and a stick and just figuring out, how to lose myself, how to entertain myself, and so forth. And basketball was my first love. I played every single sport growing up. I still play most sports to this day. And, what grabbed me with tennis was I was a pretty timid kid, and being independent in that small space, being responsible for all my successes, all my failures. Could I recall what coach had taught me? Could I execute what we'd been working on under pressure? The one and only place that as a young boy, I found utter confidence was in that space, and eventually it pervaded outside of the court. And I still have some of those same tendencies. I still really enjoy my solitude and independent endeavors.
Todd, watching you and watching clips of you when you were playing, you were always so composed. And I suppose two questions: was that composure always a struggle, or was it something that you had growing up because of who you were and who brought you up, etc.?
Well, it was, I was raised with the sense of composure being a priority. My parents would have said calm, cool, and collected on an hourly basis when I was growing up. And then my childhood tennis coach, who's the best educator I ever have been in the company of, demanded the same from all of us who were learning from him. He did it in a more militaristic way. I mean, it was, if we acted up, it was push-ups, it was sprints, it was something. But at the same time, I have a really difficult fire within me that it's a difficult fire to control. And there were times where it came out in a really positive way. And so my professional coaches were always trying to get me to allow more of myself to come out. That's difficult to do for any athlete, 30 weeks a year. And so there were ebbs and flows in that. I don't think I ever really struggled too much on suppressing the negative energy. I had it, but I think I had my parents on my shoulder, chirping in my ear, understanding that. But no matter what, I mean, like Sampras was Iceman during my career. He had more fire in his belly than anybody. He didn't need to show it.
The reason sort of I asked you that as well, because obviously I'm a big tennis fan, huge Federer fan, probably like any tennis fan, but Roger was probably a little bit different because he had that fire in him and he had to really work at staying calm, didn't he? Because he was a bit of a hothead when he was younger and that. So I suppose like for you, it was you always felt like you were in control of it rather than having to work on it.
I did. Well, by the time I was anywhere near the public eye, yes. But I also inherently, and probably because of the way I was educated, knew that it was not a benefit. So if you have an objective, core to that objective, reaching that objective is every action that you take must be in line with that objective. So, by the time I was an adult, I knew that intellectually. I knew that. I think Roger developed it, and I've never spoken to him about it, but I would imagine a good bit of it was developed by way of learning how much better he performed when he was moderated or tempered. And, some athletes never learn that. Some athletes develop that. Mardy, when I was coaching Mardy, he was typically on a bit of a roller coaster emotionally. And he said something to me just, it was the most insightful thing anybody had ever said to me on this front, probably because it was the first time I was on the coaching side of it. He said, if I try to moderate myself, I feel dead on the court. And so it's, as much as anything, he enlightened me, and now it's more or less known in the in the overall sphere. But he enlightened me that you still have to be yourself. You still have to, and I think that's probably what my coaches saw when I allowed more of the positive energy to come out when I was competing. They knew that's who I was. They knew there was a veneer of composure as you started the conversation.
Yeah. Moving forward a little bit, Todd, you sort of came through in an era of of giants, really, in terms of your Agassi's, Sampras, Beckers, etc. What did it take mentally to compete against those guys in terms of thinking you were good enough or really challenging them at the top level?
I think determination, and determination's overused. I mean, it's a very generic word, but having grown up in the shadows of Sampras, Agassi, Courier, and Chang, I don't know if any of them really knew who I was until I was 20, 21 years old. And, at 20 is when I started sharing a coach and sparring on a daily basis with Jim Courier. But I was so far behind them all of our lives. When I left college, I left with a group of athletes who had been my peer group for a long time, and they were my friends. We were there was great parity, there was a great relationship. But I started sparring with Jim, and he was 20 in the world when I started doing that, and he was number one 6 months later. He won the French Open and won the Australian Open 2x in a row, both tournaments. The first day I was on the court with him, we played a practice match, and it was 6-2, 6-1, and it didn't even feel that close. And so, I felt like at that moment I had a decision to make. I could strive to be the best of that second tier of American tennis players, or I could strive maybe to be the worst of the top tier, or potentially even the best of the top tier. And within a year, I mean, my practice matches were far closer. I was getting practice reps with Pete and Michael, Sam, Andre occasionally. Then it just starts to, I don't know, just like an incremental notion that this could be, it's at least worth continuing to pursue. But the most important thing I could have ever done was use all that talent around me as an inspiration and as a tool to try to get more out of myself.
Yeah. Give us a flavor, Todd. There are a lot of them such different characters: Agassi, Sampras, Becker, Chang, Courier. Pick a few examples and give us a flavor of the experience of being on court, competing at the highest level against these guys, whether it's the gamesmanship, the different types of pressure, a different type of challenge that you would face both physically and mentally.
Boris and Stefan Edberg. Those fellas are I think 3 years older than me, maybe 4 years older than me. So I mean, my childhood tennis coach was trying to get us to serve like Boris Becker and was showing us biomechanical movements that Boris accentuated that had never been seen before. So, I mean, there was just a mystique around them. And then Boris did a really good job of carrying that mystique with him all day, every day. But I think I was unthreatening enough to him where I felt like I got to know him a bit. But that aloof, that sort of air around him always, frankly, to this day is still, it still gets carried. And Stefan was easier for me to play against. He's in some ways a better tennis player than Boris was, as far as understanding the game, playing to his strengths, so forth and so on. But he was so kind and so approachable, although he did have an air. He was just, I mean, I was playing an exhibition match against him, a competitive exhibition match. So there was something riding on it. It just wasn't a sanctioned tournament. And I couldn't hit the ball in the court. And I yelled over to him at the changeover. And I said, "Hey, you have any tips for my volleys?" And he just looks at me in this, soft-spoken Swedish accent. "You should look at the ball when you volley." Yeah. The 5-year-old lesson, watch the ball. And I didn't win, but I certainly started playing a little bit better that day.
Yeah. I wonder, you talk particularly about Becker, they carried an aura, it's a sort of a swagger. Did some of these guys at times, I mean, maybe speak for yourself and maybe your peers as well, did some of these guys take a set advantage into matches by their mere presence and reputation?
I don't know how other players feel about this, but I always knew who I was walking out on the court with and where I was walking on that court. I didn't feel like it was affecting my ability to perform, but yeah, I knew right away, all right, well, clearly I'm going to be the first one introduced and walk out on the court before the superstar. There's some of that. And I think everybody exerts that a little bit, whether it be sort of more peacockish, get your feathers up, or whether it's just, I got off to a slow start. I'm down 2-love, but I'm totally, I'm unaffected by the fact that I've lost the first 2 games of a match against you. And I think the best sustain that longer into the match before they demonstrate that they're excited that they win an important point, or they're disappointed that they lost an important point. And that's where, I would look at Sampras and Federer, of the guys that I played against, as being the best at that. Just, this is going to come. It's just a matter of time. So why get too excited or bent out of shape along the way?
Todd, we spoke on the show last week. We spoke to Stephen Hendry, and I'm not sure if you know who Stephen Hendry is, but he's
I know who Stephen Hendry is.
Yeah, 7-time world snooker champion. And we asked him almost the reverse question, in terms of, did he feel like when he played against opponents that he had a frame, a head start, or a point? And he said he couldn't put a number on it, but he said he knew that he had an advantage when he walked out there. And I kind of think that with your Sampras, your Agassis, your Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, it's almost like, it's not really, you're not almost playing the tennis player, you're playing the man, in a sense. Does that make sense? And I saw a ridiculous stat the other day that Nadal's won 56% of his career points, Federer 54 and Djokovic 54. But between them, they've got 66 Grand Slams. And you just think, like, what is the difference in how big is the difference between ability and mindset at the very top level in tennis, in your sport, in your opinion?
Well, first of all, billiards is my number one pastime. So I'm gonna stop when we're done and listen to the Stephen Hendry podcast because I need some help. Yeah. I need some help. So, in American billiards, in pocket billiards, we actually play a game called 9-ball or 10-ball. And, the expectation is at that level that they break and then they run the table. And then sometimes the format is alternate break. And that's what, so you can't win 8 games in a row if you don't miss, because the other guy gets a chance to play. Tennis is that way. I mean, fortunately, our sport allows somebody to serve a game and then mandates that they receive a game. So that, I don't think that 54% or 56% winning percentage is at all a surprise for me. We've all won matches where we've lost more points but won the match. But I will tell you, it's if you dig one level deeper, the answer to the problem is win the right points. Don't get stressed about losing the non-points. Win the right points. And those guys, if you could quantify how important points were in certain ways, they go from 54 and 56 to 74 and 76. Yeah. And the rest of us, probably go a little bit further south.
It's amazing you say that, because when I watch, let's just take Djokovic, for example, he almost plays better when he's break point down or set point down. I mean, his shots are better and his intensity is higher, and he almost relishes those points more than if he's 40 love up and serving out wide or whatever it is. So it's kind of like, what characteristics does somebody need to when they're in those big points, to trust their technique, to trust what they've been doing, how good they are? How does the Sampras, the Agassi's, your Federer's, Nadal's, Djokovic, what characteristics do they need to be able to do that, essentially, in your opinion?
Well, first of all, they've all done it since they were pretty young, right? I mean, the beauty of professional sports is everybody's just better than they used to be physically, better than they used to be mentally, better than they used to be emotionally. And, in the grand scheme of things, pretty darn talented. So much of it is skill honed from a very early age in their development, which makes the Williams sisters pretty unique from the standpoint of they didn't go through a typical or traditional competitive pathway in their childhoods. I think the most important skill is probably awareness. So I don't know if I could tell you. I mean, I certainly, let me watch a match and I'll tell you this point's really important, that point's not so important, so forth and so on. But when you're in the heat of the moment, when you're competing at your very, very best, there's a sense that says, now is when I have to push the button. This is the button I need to push. And when I push it, I know the body, the mind, and the heart are all going to work in unison effectively. When I retired, I was 34, and I was certainly a better tennis player than I was at 24 when I was 5th in the world. But I was 100 in the world, or whatever it might have been. I go out and practice with anybody, and I was like, oh, let's put some money on this. I feel great. Go out and play with somebody that's nowhere near as good as the guy that I played in practice. And I didn't sense the moment. I didn't know which button to push. And even if I did push it, I wasn't executing nearly as well. So it all starts with, do you sense the moment? Do you sense the moment?
Let's follow up on that, because you made 2 Grand Slam finals but didn't win them. How do you reset mentally after losses that could have defined your career differently? How do those moments live with you now?
Those moments live great with me now. I don't know if I needed to do a ton of resetting. I lost in the 94 Australian Open final, which was, it was probably a little bit better of a result than I should have expected at that time. I actually beat Stefan Edberg in the semifinals, which was a really big win. But I went out against Sampras. It was the day of the Super Bowl over here. And so my coach and I literally, we were worried about where are we going to watch the Super Bowl after the final? Were we going to fly to Sydney from Melbourne so we could go to the Hard Rock Cafe to watch the Super Bowl there? There was so much nonsense in my head and in my space. And then the night before, I couldn't sleep, and the morning of, I couldn't eat. So I walked out on the court, and I don't love admitting this because it does illustrate how unprepared I was for that moment in my career. I knew I didn't have a chance of winning that match. I at one point in the first set, I had a real opportunity. I performed at that opportunity at that moment. Pete outperformed me at that moment, and the rest of the match was basically a walkover for him. And so I had to. I guess I could have ignored that, but that took, for me, it took a nanosecond to just say, man, I really screwed this up. That's an amazing opportunity that I acted like a child as opposed to a professional during. And then I had a couple opportunities between 94 and the 99 US Open final when I lost to Agassi. One of them was at Wimbledon. I was up 5-1 in the 5th set against my buddy Mal Washington. I win that match, not 99 out of 100 times. I win that 9,999 times out of 10,000 times. There's no chance in the world I lose that match twice. But I figured out how to do that. And Mal figured out how to do that. And so for me, that's when I needed a reset. I started seeing a sports psychologist. Really, it was mid-career, so it was helpful to, acknowledge that these opportunities weren't just going to continue to team in. And then when I played Andre at the US Open in the final in 99, I was every bit there. I was every bit ready to play. I was aware of the moments. I pushed the button. I executed for the most part. I did have some execution errors that were critical, but I couldn't walk off the court feeling anything other than gratified that I'd controlled what I could control. What I couldn't control was the execution, and that if that's the world, I think that's, for an athlete, that's that's the reasonable objective, is can I put myself in a position to where I lose because I don't execute, and only because I don't execute.
Just to go back to the Wimbledon game in '96 against Mal Washington, and was that a choke moment? And if so, what is that experience really like on the intensity of a centre court or equivalent? What's actually physically, mentally happening to you?
Yes, it's definitely a choke moment. I mean, there's no way of concealing it. But I will say that because I think this illustrates how severe the effect is. Then we didn't have water bottles or thermoses on the court. We drank out of, Dixie cups at the changeover. And I had a 10 or 12 ounce cup of water, and I could only have it filled halfway because my hand was shaking so bad when I was trying to take a drink of water at the changeover. If you can't control what's in your hand, just trying to get it to your mouth, it's awfully difficult to imagine to execute at a world-class level on the court. The trigger was probably one or two shots that were right there that would have gotten me, that one step closer to the finish line that I didn't execute. So, it started with execution errors, but execution errors are supposed to happen. And then I, it went from execution to which button do I push to what moment am I in? And I had no, by the end of the match, I had no clue where I was. I had zero clue where I was.
It occurs to me, actually, I want to ask a question about the work you did with the psychologist, but as you're talking, I wonder whether for us, as Brits in the same era, Tim Henman was our sort of nearly guy, although actually objectively you achieved more because you reached Grand Slam finals, which
Hey, can you say that again out loud, really loud, and can I record it so I can send a text to Tim? Our families are super close, so I would love to send him that note.
Okay, well, I'll ask Kev, the producer, to clip it for you, and
That's
you
perfect.
can send it as his ringtone. That Todd Martin objectively had a more successful career by Grand Slam achievement than you, Tim. I said it. But do you have a hill named after you at a Grand Slam tournament?
I don't, nor do I have a mount.
Yeah, you don't have a Murray, nor do you have a mount.
Or a ridge, or a ridge.
Or a ridge. Yeah. But anyway, what I was just thinking was that I bet you had a whole fan base like we were for Tim, going through the ringer year after year, but knowing in the end, I mean, Sampras was kind of like the Hendry. I mean, they're extremely lovable and lovable guys now, but you sort of kind of hated them as fans. They were the sort of the villain of the piece because there were all these other nearly men. And I suppose that's why Ivanisevic's Wimbledon win was so cathartic for him and for fans, because you'd experienced the struggle for so many years watching him. But did you if you want to respond to that?
No, I listen. I think you're absolutely on point, and I, as much as I would like to send that clip to Tim, I think he represented himself as well as just about anybody as far as being persistent to put himself into the position. It's not that he made the semifinals of the US Open that many times. He made the semifinals of Wimbledon that many times under this ridiculous gauntlet of attention. In fact, I can't remember what year it was. If it was 96, it might have been 96. At his first run, I beat him in the quarterfinals. And And I said to him, he was 19. I said to him, like, I cannot believe how well and gracefully you've handled all this. We didn't know each other, but to go have a hit maybe at that point in time. And he had to endure it every year, all the time. And be a disappointment for the country. And he was outperforming 95% of the population of the elite athletes in the world. He was outperforming everybody in Great Britain for the last, several decades. And it was still a disappointment. So I liked that. I liked being the fifth best American of my generation. It was, I don't know how I would have responded if I had Tim's life. He was built to be number one in that, on that small island. And I think I was built to be almost, but not right there on this larger landmass. And we spoke about it earlier, but a lot of times people will say, "Oh, it's too bad you had to play around the same time as Agassi and Sampras and those guys." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" It's like the best thing in the world for me. I had no negative press. I had no negative attention until I had great success. And then, I had a couple of moments where I flopped. I had to endure public scrutiny for that. And scrutiny is a tough word. It's a strong word for it. But then I could go right back to the drawing board, get going, and see if I couldn't challenge myself to be better than I was the day before.
Well, you talked about your work with a psychologist. What did that entail? What did you get out of it?
The most important thing that he said was probably the first sentence. We were sitting at my kitchen table, and he said, "Don't think of me as a psychologist or a shrink. I am simply an organizer of thought." And, this was in 96. So early on in the sports science revolution, that there was a stigma. I doubt I would have spoken publicly about seeing a sports psychologist at that point in time. But that did two things for me. One, it disarmed the moment, to where I wasn't really feeling like, I have a problem, therefore I'm seeing a psychologist. And two, it set me off with him into a process of, okay, what's in my head, what's in my life, and what do I need to address? What am I ignoring that I need to bring to the forefront? And what am I spending too much time worrying about that is really inconsequential? And that that was a life gift as well as a career gift.
Todd, moving into sort of trying to help other people and seeking help, etc. What did you not enjoy about the coaching side of the game?
So I've been married for almost 25 years, and it's my wife and I have 3 kids. It's the best I could ever hope for. But I just don't believe that we're meant to have more than one-on-one relationships. I shared my coaches throughout my career. I might have been coached on a one-on-one basis for a year of my career, and it was not the best year of my career. I think that as a coach, I found it to be remarkably stifling. This is my canvas. With Mardy, there was certainly more room to improve, but with Novak, he was third in the world for the 3 previous years. He was 22 years old. So, and at the time, he certainly rid himself of this ultimately. But at the time, he felt sorry for himself for being in the era of Nadal and Federer. So, what we were talking about was probably a 5% growth potential in his psychology, maybe a 1% growth potential in his understanding and performance in the game. I'm more of a teacher probably than I am a coach, and that so those things just didn't work well. And I don't want anybody to believe that being an athlete is necessarily living a life of impact, but certainly playing sports globally and on really important stages, you're entertaining a population. So there's a broader impact. Going onto a tennis court with one person day in and day out felt really low impact for me. And I just fortunately, I finally admitted that to myself, that it wasn't for me, and started exploring other avenues.
Todd, I saw something that you said during your time with Novak. You said that within the first week of coaching him, a quote from Novak was, "Champions come from within." Now, I'm really interested. Can a coach that? Any coach?
I think, and I really distinguish between teacher and coach. I think these types of beliefs and values need to be addressed with young athletes before they're imagining playing in the finals of Wimbledon. Novak was born special, and he was raised to be special, and he was raised with tennis as a job in my estimation. And that's both a curse of where he grew up, but also a benefit of where he grew up. Like, this is your way. So focus, you have a better life waiting for you. He was 22 years old when he said that. And it's just like, it was a punch in the gut. Like, he had it so well organized, so well formulated in his mind. And this was, I don't believe, something that he was taught. I think this is something that he learned, and he could intuit with whoever he was around. I'll quote him the rest of my life, because I think it is, it's both wise, but it's fascinatingly accurate. At the end of the day, who do you're looking at him, right?
Yeah.
You're the one. Every morning in the mirror, like, you're the one. Are you going to make it happen, or are you not?
Only you as an athlete know if you're good enough underneath everything, behind all the bravado, the coaches, the staff, the tournaments, etc. Only you know when you look in the mirror if you're good enough, don't you?
Only you know whether you're giving yourself the chance to be good enough. And that, that's the beast of it all, is when the athlete performs poorly or what have you, they know that. Everybody else knows that. But then they wake up the next morning and they also know deep down inside, is today a better day? Am I going to make today a better day?
Todd, you mentioned, we've just spoken a bit about Novak. You mentioned that you had 3 years with Mardy Fish, who, was silver medal at the Olympics, regular quarterfinal, got to number 14 in the world, 8 or 9 career titles. So by absolutely no means a mug by any stretch of the imagination.
Nope.
But what, I suppose, going back a little bit to Novak, but could you sense that there was a difference in personality? And I think that's the crux of all of this, is kind of Novak, the person and the personality. Was he a different person to Mardy Fish? Forget about the tennis player in them, maybe.
So I worked with both of them, or I started working with both of them when they were 22 years old. Novak was far closer to being a finished product or a complete product at that age. So, let's call it a 5-year gap in the maturation or development of the athlete. Both of them ultimately figured out that if they took control of their lives and took maybe not even control, took responsibility for their lives, they would have their best chance of being successful. Mardy, well after I stopped working with him, and I think probably his wife Stacy would have been the most influential on this. Mardy took a tact that he hadn't taken ever before. I mean, when I was working with him, if somebody would have told me he had 10 pounds to lose, I would have said, no, he's got 15. He, I believe, ended up losing 30 pounds. I wouldn't have believed that for the life of me. But he went into sort of a savage mode of, I've got one chance at this. And it doesn't matter what opportunities I've squandered to date. I've got one chance to get the very best out of myself. And he took it. And Novak did the same. So I think in many ways, tons of similarities in perhaps between those two in particular. I don't imagine Rafa Nadal would have had any of those same moments of looking in the mirror and saying, okay, I'm 25 years old. It's time to get going. Like he got going at 4 and never took his foot off the gas. So, and both remarkably talented athletes. I mean, Mardy's got the best set of hands I've ever been around. And the first time I was on the court with Novak, I was talking to his longtime coach, Marian Vida. And, Novak was just warming up, and then all of a sudden the ball went a little bit further away, and I saw this blur go by me, and I'm like, what just happened? And I realized it was Novak. Like, people aren't supposed to be that fast.
Thinking about your career again and the end of it, and sort of connecting that to the present day, what was the hardest part for you about walking away from professional tennis? To what extent did your identity shift, and as you recognize that you had to now become not the athlete but a new person?
Yeah, the real world's rough. I mean, it's so I felt, at least on paper, I felt like there wasn't another professional tennis player, and perhaps not another professional athlete, who was more prepared for life after athletics than me. Now, that was probably proof of the most arrogant thought I've ever had. But in spite of that, despite that, I was remarkably unprepared. My wife and I had a 1.5-year-old son. We were so happy. Everything was great. In my family, things remained that way. But in my own sort of deep, dark moments. Like I'd spent the last 20 years, 25 years, waking up every morning and going to bed every night thinking about, how do I hit that ball better? How do I position myself better? How do I match up against this person? I wasn't at all remorseful or sad about not competing anymore. I just totally underestimated how important the simplicity of the day-to-day objective was, and how passion infusing that was. And then, lo and behold, I'm 34 years old and I'm entering into the world of trial and error. Let me see how I do on the broadcasting. Let me see how I do in coaching. Let me see how I do in the business space. And they're like, that after having such clarity of purpose all those days, to wake up and not have it, it was painful. And there are moments to this day that still have that. Like it, I love that simplicity. I love waking up and just knowing, who or what do I have to punch in the face in order to do well, and go to bed and feel like I've done a good day's work. I think that's an epidemic across sports, not just professional sports, but sort of our hyper focus in youth on sports. It's really difficult for people to put that behind them if that passion has sustained. That's the good fortune that I had, was I was 34. I still cared. I still loved to play, and finding something that would fulfill me next was never easy.
Is there a specific moment you wish you could go back to, not necessarily to change the result, but just to be in it again?
I would love to be in it again from start to finish. I mean, it's Jose Higueras, who was Jim Courier's coach and my mentor throughout my 14 years on tour, said to me pretty early in our relationship, play as long as you possibly can. Play as long as you possibly can. I said, why is that? And he said, you'll never find anything that gives you this much of a buzz. And he's 100% right. And this was coming from a guy who coached Chang to the French Open title, coached Courier to multiple slams and number one, coached Sampras, coached Federer, coached me. To hear him say it, and he was fifth in the world. Like, he was a really good tennis player. Life, we're not supposed to live in a buzz all of our lives. And I recognize that, but it when you're in it, and to feel that again, really, really, I would love that. I'd love that.
Todd, you're I'm not quite sure what to take from this, because I'm announcing I'm finishing up at the end of this season. So in about 5 weeks or so, I'm going to be basically going through exactly what you've just talked about for the last couple of minutes. So I'm kind of at the stage where I am ready, and I know it's time, and my body is telling me it's time. But I completely agree with you. There is nothing, and I've deliberately almost gone into the media side of it, I suppose, because I want to go to match days. I want to experience just that 1% or 5% of what it was to be as a player. So for me, that was kind of one thing where you can, whatever you do in life afterwards, I will never be able to replace being on the field with 30 other blokes, or in your example, being on Arthur Ashe court or centre court, etc. But I think it's just trying to replicate or keep as much of that buzz in your life as possible without having to carry on doing it and doing it and doing it over and over again is something that I probably feel is quite right.
Well, Dan, first of all, you're doing it already, right? You're experimenting, if you will, with with other endeavors, and you're seeing from a practical standpoint, what does it take to do all these things, and then learning those skills and understanding where can you get better, and where do you hit the ball out of the park right away. But what I come back to, and fortunately, I think it's one of the reasons why in an iterative process, I ultimately found the thing that does give me that best buzz, or the gratification of doing something with purpose. I think we've all heard, do whatever you want, but be the best that you can be at it. And, when the clarity that athletics gave me was, I love this. Like, this is a child's game and I absolutely adore it. So it's easy to wake up and strive to be the best that I can be at it. I think the great business people, the great coaches, the great broadcasters, the great doctors, they have that. They have this drive to do it the best way possible, and create their sport out of it. And I've found that in business leadership, executive leadership, and it's not what I felt on the tennis court, but it's a great feeling, and it's they're great problems to have to solve on a day-to-day basis. They're great things, great surprises around every corner, and surprises and challenges that I never would have come across if I hadn't sort of had the guts to give it a whirl and see what this is like. And I think that's an undervalued thing about athletes. They're taking a massive risk by putting themselves out there. They're risking their own self confidence, self perspective, but also, it's a business. So they could set their lives 2 years, 5 years, 8 years back by chasing a dream.
Todd, we've just spoken about for the last sort of nearly hour or so about sort of what success was like for you on the court and during your coaching and playing career. What does success mean to you now? Before we go into the quick fire round question, what does success mean to Todd Martin today?
Yeah, the meaning of success. The meaning of success is typically not on the scoreboard, and I look at success. I look at success as doing the best that you can, controlling what you can control, and doing it in a way that you can feel, I don't want to say proud of, but you can respect yourself for the way you've gone about doing your business. There is a scoreboard that's related to that, but I deem the scoreboard to be a byproduct of what we're really in control of. And so if I feel like I can go to sleep at night and not have my mind clear, but have my mind focused on either self-reflection or projection for the next day or days, I generally feel like it's a positive.
Well, on that note, Dan sort of preluded our quick fire round without actually asking your permission to do one, but it's a sort of a leading question, if you like, rhetorical. We like to end with a few gentle quick fire questions before saying goodbye. So if you're okay with that, I'll ask the first one. If we weren't talking about sport right now, what's a topic you'd be passionate to discuss?
Cultural evolution.
Give a few more words.
I thought you said it was. I thought it was quick fire.
It is quick fire, but just what you mean by cultural evolution. We won't ask any more follow-ups on that.
Yeah, I think I was raised with very traditional values. I hold on to those traditional values. My kids make fun of me for those traditional values. But I also think that we can become more and more progressive without losing who we've been. And that I think we've seen it in our world. Tech, media, all is sort of accelerated this stuff. But there's a great tension in the air that isn't necessarily political. It has maybe some political slants to it, but I really think that the deeper, and I'm overly philosophical anyways, but I think the deeper, more philosophical conversations are really enjoyable to have. And I like having them with people I disagree with and people that I agree with. And I even prefer to listen to two people that I really respect, have that debate so that it helps inform where I am.
Great.
I'll try and go for a slightly lighter one, Todd, next up. If you could go to any sporting event in the world, whether it be the Super Bowl live event, the 100 meters final, the Olympics, what would it be? Anything in the world?
If I could be assured of a really high level boxing match for a world championship, I could do that in a heartbeat, and it would be probably sort of the middleweight level, just like fast, furious, and I believe, I love that sort of test of will, test of strength, test of mind that boxing is. I'm no technician on that front, but that would get my juices flowing for sure.
Nice one. Okay, last one from me, and then I'll let Dan have the final word. What's the kindest thing anyone's ever done for you?
I heard that in one of your other podcasts. I should have given some thought to that one. What's the kindest thing? Well, this isn't necessarily the kindest thing, but it is awfully kind and human, and I love human acts that maybe can be deemed to be, well, of course, but at the same time, it's really nice that somebody actually did that. So I was the CEO of the International Tennis Hall of Fame for 9 years. And while they were offering me an extension to work for them, through the board was offering me an extension through the end of my youngest child's high school journey, which was 5 more years, I took a different job. And they had every right to be, to feel like you sort of, looked a gift horse in the mouth, whatever. And the group of leaders, volunteer leaders, who are spectacular business people in their own right, have been so remarkably supportive of me as I've gone through a search process of my own that was not the most gratifying, was not the most enjoyable. And at every turn, each and every one of them was there to lend an ear, to introduce me to somebody else in their network, and thrilled when I found my work at Swing.
Great.
Very good. And Todd, just to finish, you've been absolutely amazing, but who is the greatest tennis player of all time, in your opinion?
There is no such thing. There is no such thing. And I've never, I say that it was a really good line of defense when I was working for the Hall of Fame, which was the celebrators of the legends of the game. But at the end of the day, you could look at Laver and, he won 11 Grand Slam titles with a 6-year ban from playing in those tournaments. He won the Grand Slam, all 4 in the same year twice. Borg was amazing, retired at 26. Sampras won 14 majors in his career. The next highest tally was 8 during that same time frame from Agassi. So I could argue that rather than being at 24 versus 22 versus 20, Djokovic, Nadal, Federer, I'd rather be at 14 against 8. Right? I mean, that might prove that on a level playing field, Sampras was way better than the rest of us, than Novak has been way better than the rest of the guys today. So I think it's really easy to come up with a pretty short list, but man, there are some really special guys, and I think they would all figure it out in other generations. You put a wood racket in the 60s and Novak, I like his chances.
I haven't actually heard that sort of analogy said before, and I think it's a really, really strong one and a strong argument with the difference between the 4 and the 8 and the 24 to 22. So, yeah, but it's been brilliant chatting to you, Todd, and we can just say thank you so much. It's been a brilliant last hour or so.
Yes,
my pleasure. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you so much, Todd. Wonderful. Well, I have to say, Dan, that a couple of highlights for me. Firstly, to say, I'm the only one of the 3 of us who hasn't been a professional sportsman, so I've never had the buzz that Todd was talking about. But as we were talking there, I felt like this is the reason we do this podcast, because this was a huge buzz. Like, listening to him, there's such a I thought he carried a great aura talking about Becker, but such a humility, such a presence, such authority, such composure. I thought he was an extremely impressive individual.
Yeah, he was. I think I agree with what you just said there, Daniel. Like, it's kind of like, what other facet of life would I be able to speak to Todd Martin about Novak Djokovic? Do you know what I mean? That's kind of like the buzz, and talk about his career and playing against Sampras and Agassi, and or talking about playing Ronnie O'Sullivan with Stephen Hendry last. You know what I mean? It's like that's right. The buzz as well, isn't it? In terms of that. But I thought he was what I thought he was really. Everything was kind of like black and white with him a little bit, wasn't it? And I loved the reference he made. You know, when we talked about the 56% of points won by Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic. But I love the way he went when he said, if you look at how many, say, championship points or how many break points or big, crucial, important points were won, he said that he thinks that those guys would probably, that percentage would move up to about 70, 74, 75%. And the guys in the middle, there probably goes south. He included himself in it as well, didn't he? In terms of that, and I think that was the big thing. Where what was quite interesting was that's clearly the difference between the top guys in their field and the guys who are extremely talented but probably haven't had the success of those guys. So I thought it was really, really good. I liked that point. That was something that I wrote down when he was speaking about it.
Yeah, and even a nice moment for you at the end where I thought Todd was in his avuncular way, giving you the benefit of his sort of 20 years on you of retirement experience, and that was pretty cool.
Well, he's nearly talked me out of retirement, I think. So not quite. If we'd have chatted for another 5 or 10 minutes, he may well have changed my mind. But I'm staying retired, staying with my original decision.
With your original decision.
But I like also, like the greatest of all time. I thought I thought he may have given us an answer, but then I thought like the way in which he broke it down is, I haven't heard that before, and I thought that was a really strong argument for it.
That was good. That was good, because it's impossible, isn't it? Different eras, different quality, different levels of sort of fitness and science. So how do you possibly compare Rod Laver with Pete Sampras with Roger Federer? But I thought sort of head-to-head records was a reasonably neat way of doing it, which sort of says that actually Sampras was 14-8 the best versus 22-21 or 20. That was good.
And it gives Todd a little bit more of an excuse that he played against the greatest of all time in his era as well and didn't quite get over the line. So we'll give him that as well.
All right. Good stuff, mate. Lovely to chat with you and speak to you soon. See you next time.
Cheers, Daniel.
And finally, everyone, make sure to subscribe to A Load of BS on Sport. And please leave us a review if you enjoyed the show, wherever you listen to your podcast. Thank you so much.